Practical Anarchy, A Guide to Self-Determination. Dickie Dread. Oh, hang on. I need to sit up a bit more. Section 80. Federation, not isolation. Anarchism is sometimes caricatured as small enclaves retreating into self-sufficient bubbles. Whilst local experiments in autonomy are crucial, they are rarely sustainable on their own. History shows that without federations linking them together, such initiatives risk being overwhelmed by scarcity, repression, or simple exhaustion. Federation is therefore not an optional add-on, but central to anarchist survival, a way of balancing local autonomy with broader solidarity. The idea echoes what we examined in earlier sections on federated resource councils, coordination without centralised command. The strength of anarchist practice lies not in isolation but in webs of connection, from the 19th century syndicalist federations to contemporary global climate movements. The logic is simple. Decisions are made at the most local level possible. The common concerns are handled collectively through recallable delegates who carry the mandates of their assemblies. Case studies, historical precedents, from the CNT to Chiapas. The Spanish Revolution of 1936 remains one of the clearest illustrations. The CNT FAI Federation linked workplaces, villages and regions into a structure that could mobilise against fascism while simultaneously managing collective production. Federation allowed the Spanish collectives to coordinate food, arms and transport across large territories without surrendering local decision-making. Later, the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico, took up the principle in their autonomous municipalities. Each village governs itself through assemblies, but decisions are woven together through regional councils, a form of federated self-government rooted in indigenous traditions of consultation and consensus. Their endurance for nearly 3 decades against state and paramilitary violence shows how federation creates resilience where isolation would mean defeat. Case studies, contemporary federations, global and local. Federation is not confined to Latin America. In northern Syria, the Kurdish-led Rojava revolution has built what Abdullah Öcalan calls democratic confederalism, a network of neighbourhood communes, locals, councils and cooperatives linked together without a central state. Despite war, embargoes and attacks from multiple sides, this structure has sustained education, healthcare, women's councils and ecological projects. In Europe, the alter globalisation and climate justice movements organised through federated camps and networks. The climate camps in the UK from 2006 to 2010 linked hundreds of local groups into national structure capable of mass direct action against coal, airports and energy corporations. Similar federated structures underpin Extinction Rebellion's international spread, though they struggle with co-option and NGO-style bureaucracy. Close to home, the UK has its own experiments in federation that are less spectacular but no less important. Radical Roots, a network of housing and worker cooperatives founded in the 1980s, continues to demonstrate how small-scale co-ops can link together to provide collective financing, training and mutual support. Federation of Housing Cooperatives offers another example, coordinating legal advice and funding channels across dozens of small groups. Meanwhile, the Transition Towns movement, which began in Totnes, has grown into a loose federation of initiatives, experimenting with local currencies, food sovereignty and energy co-ops. These federated structures lack the revolutionary drama of Spain or Rojava, but they highlight how federations can be built in everyday life, in ways rooted in ecological and economic self-reliance. Beyond Europe, other federations thrive under very different conditions. In West Africa, cooperative federations link small-scale farmers, credit unions and women's groups to provide resources and political leverage, showing how grassroots federation can resist both state neglect and corporate extraction. In India, the recent farmers' protests, 2020 to 21, demonstrated the power of federation. Hundreds of regional unions and assemblies coordinated one of the largest protest movements in history, sustaining encampments for over a year through shared kitchens, healthcare and schools. In Indigenous Australia, regional federation of Aboriginal land councils have provided a collective voice in resisting mining corporations and state assimilation projects, imperfect and often co-opted, but still demonstrating how federated structures allow local communities to defend land and culture. Case study: the Basque separatist movement. The Basque struggle in Spain and France illustrates both the power and the limits of autonomy movements. Rooted in a distinct language and culture, Basque nationalism gained strength during Franco's dictatorship, and regional identities were violently repressed. In this context, Euskadi da Euskasasuna, ETA, Basque Homeland and Freedom, emerged in the late 1950s, initially mixing cultural revival resistance to fascism. Over time, however, it turned toward armed struggle, carrying out assassinations and bombings through the 1970s and 1990s. For anarchists, the Basque case is instructive. On one hand, community-level organising flourished. Worker cooperatives like Mondragon showed how federated structures could provide jobs, welfare and cultural survival outside the direct control of Madrid or Paris. Grassroots assemblies and cultural associations also played vital roles in sustaining identity and autonomy. Yet the ETA's campaign escalated. The emphasis shifted from bottom-up federation towards top-down militarism. The movement became defined less by everyday mutual aid than by cycles of violence and repression. The Basque experience shows how autonomy movements can bifurcate. One path towards anarchist-inspired federation of communities, another towards nationalist centralism with statist ambitions. The lessons mirror those of earlier sections on obstacles and repression. Violence often invites state crackdown, whilst grassroots cooperation is harder to co-opt or crush. The endurance of Basque culture today owes more to schools, co-ops and assemblies than to bombs of the ETA. For anarchism, the takeaway is clear. Federation thrives when rooted in everyday practices of solidarity and shared governance. That when autonomy becomes captured by nationalist elites or armed vanguards, it risks replicating the very logics of statehood it set out to resist. Low-tech federations, resilience beyond the internet. Today's anarchist federations often rely heavily on digital infrastructure, encrypted messaging, live streams, online assemblies. Yet this reliance brings risks, as earlier sections warned when discussing surveillance capitalism. Earlier federations remind us that low-tech methods, travelling delegates, rotating congresses, bicycle couriers, newsletters and zines, build robust censorship-resistant networks long before smartphones. In Chiapas, communication often still relies on human couriers between villages. In Rojava, councils use face-to-face assemblies as the primary decision-making forum. Even in the high-tech West, movements like the squatting networks of Berlin and Amsterdam used word of mouth, posters and independent radio to organise effectively. In the UK, cooperative federations often meet through periodic assemblies rather than constant online interaction. An important reminder that face-to-face governance remains more resilient than digital infrastructures are surveilled or collapse. Federation, a survival and transformation. The pattern is clear. Communes, squats or co-ops that stand alone are easy targets for oppression or co-option. Those that federate, linking their struggles and resources, endure. The state understands this too, which is why it often targets federations explicitly. In the UK, the Police Crime Censoring the Courts Act of 2022 widened police powers against protest and assembly, effectively criminalising some forms of federative organising. A continuation of the trajectory are evident in the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act of 1994. This legal repression demonstrates how seriously states take the threat of federated organisation. Federation is not merely defensive. It allows small groups to scale their impact, coordinate responses to ecological crisis, and imagine global solidarity without global governance. The principle points directly towards how resource-based societies, envisaged in Chapter 8, might function through networks of autonomous but connected assemblies. In age of planetary crisis, federation is the alternative to both isolated communes and oppressive central states.